Right, so welcome to, believe it or not, webinar 6. My name's Simon Lovesey, founder of Restart Sailing, and Sarah Racer, joined by John Emmett.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Here we are on Friday again, and yeah, bit of news coming in, and I think probably most things, thankfully, seem to be going in the right direction. If we look at the slide with three of the stages, we're definitely progressing towards the second half now, which is good. And if you look at the UK, we have a fairly steady rolling average of infections, which is below the 7 day rolling average is below the 1,000 marks. I think that's good news. So I think a lot of clubs will be looking at club racing now, and today we'll also talk very briefly about some nationals and international sailing as well.
Okay, but I think fair to say, John, we're still probably in the middle of this group, aren't we?
Yeah, I think most people would be at the beginning of the middle group. So that's getting back between simple racing and normal club racing. From my perspective, Castle Cove will have our first ever Sunday normal race this Sunday. So I think that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Really looking forward to that. And it looks like the weather's going to play ball. I realise obviously not all clubs are in that situation. And I think the big news recently is about the masks. And it's strange because it seems a bit of a mixed message when, for example, they're saying you don't have to wear masks in pubs, whereas you have to open them in shops. And when I grew up, if I was asked to draw a picture of a surgeon, for example, I would draw a picture of a person wearing a mask, because before the COVID-19 crisis, I just thought it was generally understood that people wore masks to prevent infection.
Yes.
And it seems strange there's such a backlash about it, but we are where we are, so hopefully things will
So
be moving forward.
masks have sort of become more compulsory today, I think, in England, and not quite sure how that fits for sailing clubs. Obviously, going shopping, you need to wear your mask, but not quite clear, as you say, pubs and restaurants, perhaps not.
Yeah, a bit of mixed messaging with the clubs. I mean, once you're out on the water, you're very well ventilated area, got lots of sun, hopefully lots of breeze. Certainly Sunday, it's looking very good westerly on the south coast. And so things safe. It's where people end up in close proximity. I mean, my view is with the sailing clubs, with the clubhouses, small, humid environments like you might get in a changing room, obviously not ideal. Once you're outside, it's inherently safer, and the clubs need to look at that.
Yeah, and the REA have put some good resources out this week about sort of test and trace and trying to support that. So,
Yeah, I've got to say the RIA have done a fantastic job. I mean, they did a very, very quick turnaround with the documentation. They actually submitted some documentation last, no, a week ago, last Tuesday. So they must have turned things around in just a couple of days. Probably a busy weekend for some people, but of course they're still waiting. So the guidance is quite vague. And because of that, I hope the government will eventually just allow I guess you'll call them the governing bodies of the sports to make their decisions, because I think the RWA have answered questions as soon as they possibly can, and they're in the same way waiting for government guidance. And I think it's understandable because actually we're fine. We're 80% there. A lot of us are sailing,
yeah.
whereas there's some other sports which are in a much worse situation, and there's only so many people working so much of the time to get things implemented. So I think sailing's in a good place.
Yeah, and I think some questions are still over double handers, aren't there? That seems to be one of the outstanding
Yeah,
areas.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer, because if you twisted my arm to more or less breaking point, I think I'd have to say that you can't really go there because there's so many unknowns. But it's definitely not black and white. So if you're going two-man boat sailing down your local club and you're sailing with somebody who's a close personal family friend, and you're not really extending your circle by any more than one person, I feel that's a very different situation, that club race, to if a club decided to put on a national championships for two-man boats. And I think the key message here, and we'll look at this later in some of the slides, is we just have to have some common sense about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, because we could be waiting a very long time to see it in black and white, and hopefully by then we will already be back to normal.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chart and talking about international racing. I see right at the far end the 4.7 Europeans. Looks like it's going to go ahead next month, although for English people, Portugal is not on the list of exemptions, which means they would have to quarantine for 14 days when they get back. And that means they wouldn't be able to do any events in the UK. And the Masters Europeans is moving to, and please forgive my pronunciation, to Circo Nautico Andorra, which is, I guess, less than an hour away from its original venue, and people would still be flying into Nice airport. I mean, none of these events are set in stone, and you could look at last minute cancellation if there was a lot of COVID cases within the organisation authority, but things do seem to be moving in the right direction. I think probably more by luck than judgment, although there's a lot of hard work going on. The laser class have done very well because they had their worlds very early, and they're having their Europeans, fingers crossed, very late. And the other bit of international news, because we're sort of starting at the end and working back, Kiel has extended its entry. In other words, they're now allowing more people to come in, which I think is a good thing. But again, you have to have the caveat. It's an incredibly well organised event. I mean, at the best of times, the German Sailing Association, they're very well organised, and they have a lot of space at that venue. So it's a particular set of circumstances.
And my memory of that regatta is it's spread over 2 weeks, isn't it? I think it doesn't all happen at once, does it?
Yeah, and they've actually curtailed it. So it's so part 2 is only a 4-day event. So actually, 1 day flying in, 4 days of racing, 1 day flying out. Not even going to be away for a week.
But not all classes sail at the same time, I seem to remember.
Yeah, no, it's separated into several parts, and there's time between them to do cleaning. There's no training allowed at the venue before, so they can have 2 weeks to disinfect, much like they do a 2-week sweep at the Olympic venue before the Games.
Yeah.
So it's just so organised. You can see that's going to be looking very promising, I think.
Okay.
And Germany as a whole, I think, is in a better situation than we are in the UK. I'm sorry to say it, we feel a bit like the sick man of Europe, but we'll see what things look like.
Yeah, so looking at the data, we're getting actually we'll come on to the Pacifics in a minute, but some nationals starting really to emerge. So actually the last time we looked at this, we were looking at 86% cancelled. That's sort of now dropped to 78% as we see more events starting to really get off the blocks, but actually still cancellations. Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as we predicted, any events that go ahead will be heavily oversubscribed because people are so keen to do them. I think we've probably seen that with both the Mustos and the Aeros. And the thought at the back of my head is fastest finger first the best way to decide who gets to do a championship? Actually, going back to Kiel, initially the Laser World Champion didn't have a place. I mean, that has changed. So maybe we need to be creative and have qualification for events where they have restricted entry. Yeah. That's what happened with the World Cup series. Some places were done off ranking for the finals, and some places were done at events. So, for example, they gave people who had a good regatta at Palma the chance to attend. So when you have to restrict, I think it's got to be done in a fair way, and I don't think fastest fingers first is necessarily.
So I think you'll see a new thinking, but good to see. I think we had our first nationals, if anyone knows better, but the RS Varios managed to get a sneaky nationals in at Itchner, and then we had
small but perfectly formed.
Yes, but no one's come forward to challenge them as being the first, so well done to the RS class there. And then we've had some big jog races going on, about 120 boats, doing some sort of semi-offshore race. So things like the Nab Tower. We've got the Rorke race next week. I think they're knocking about 150 boats. So I think encouraging, we're seeing some big numbers coming out, which obviously, as you said, brings its own problems. But
Yeah, I think you're going to get this fear of missing out, because people will suddenly think, well, they don't want to miss out on the one event of the year, which they could participate in. I mean, the guidance, I think, has been to kept particularly vague just because there's so many situations. And I do think last minute cancellations are still possible. Sailing clubs may have their own restrictions, whether they're governed by water authorities or harbour authorities. And I do understand that the government has prioritise sort of the commercial interest to get those sports back that support the economy. And this two-man boat situation, it's an oddity of our sport, if you like. What I have seen at Castle Cove on a Wednesday evening, which is normally light winds when the sea breeze is starting to die, we have a lot of people with two-man boats who've been sailing them single-handed. I'm thinking of scorpions and things like that, and that's quite an interesting way. It keeps the class going.
Well, I think we're seeing innovation. But you mentioned last-minute cancellations. We saw a regatta in America. I can't remember the name, but popped up on some American sites. Was due to start today. The club had a COVID incident, I think, on Wednesday and Thursday. People are on the way, but unfortunately they've had to cancel it. So
it's a good time to be booking free cancellation accommodation and flights and so on. That's for sure. And personally, as an organizer, they must really feel the weight of responsibility when putting something together. I mean, the RYA, in terms of putting out policy and everything to the government, they've tried very hard. But I think if you go away from the detail, there's two key messages. And the first is that every club is different, which is why it's so hard to have concrete guidance. And the second thing is just don't take unnecessary risks. I think it really is, common sense should prevail. And I think it really is that simple.
Yeah, and also I think the need to be flexible. I mean, we'll hopefully be talking to sort of Paul Jackson soon, who's been involved with Mersey Week and the Laser Nationals, and all those events have had to adapt, and I think they put in policies that allow them to change really almost at the last minute, perhaps even during the event.
I mean, it's interesting. The Laser Nationals, normally a 6-day event. They're looking at just doing it as a 3-day event, and it seems it's difficult to weight them the same, if that makes sense. If not everybody can go, and there's only a limited number of races. But at the same time, kudos to trying the best to put on an event. I think we need to think long term as well, because I don't think this particular situation is going away.
Well, yes, it's
very
here.
Quickly.
It's here for certainly this year and probably next year and even beyond that. So we need to adapt. Yes.
Yeah, maybe just a more conservative approach, so if we've got reduced rescue cover and so on, you have wind limits of 23 knots rather than 25, or just whatever's appropriate. When clubs allow free sailing, they need to be very clear that the people need to be competent for the conditions they go out in. Yeah. But whatever happens, you can never please everybody all the time, and I think that's especially true now.
But good news. So coming up the end of August, I think these events are the RS Aeros have managed to work hard with Eastbourne. I think that's a picture of Eastbourne, nicely socially distanced, big beach.
Well, it's perfect, isn't it? You can launch and recover many boats all at the same time, and I think those sort of venues have a huge advantage. I think Hayling Island is a bit of a standout club for me. Their sort of risk assessment and so on, I think, has been world class. And that's something to look to where you have difficulties on shore. That's what we need to be careful of. I think that the sad thing for the RS, obviously, when you have a limit of 100, there's going to be some people there, perhaps who've done it for the last 2 or 3 years, who possibly didn't get a place because their typing wasn't quick enough, and that's the only downside.
But I know Pete Barton, and hopefully we'll perhaps catch up with him sometime, has worked hard with the club and got really a structure, and I think obviously they got the 3 rig sizes, so I think that actually gives some naturally social distancing in terms of clusters going out at different times and different social bubbles.
Yeah, that's what the lasers have done. They've got the radials in one section and the 4.7s and the standard in another, and it's a shame because actually having a big championships is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, but it's not appropriate at the moment. And personally, if we don't have the social aspect, suddenly it's not actually of as much interest as it would be with that social aspect.
Well,
It's
that's
something
right.
we expect.
It's going to be sailing, but nothing else. But good to see the Mustos sold out 50 boats again, similar timescale of the RS Aeros at Brixham. RS Terrors understand that they've had 3 attempts, so they're on their 3rd venue, but they've ended up at WPNSA, which probably must be built for the Olympics and all the numbers must be the biggest social distance
Yeah,
venue.
they have a lot of space there. They have a lot of space there. So yeah, good luck to the Terrors, and just a thank you to everybody who's been putting in such amount of work. If you joined a sailing club committee or class association committee 12 months ago, I bet you weren't expecting to have all these things to deal with.
Yeah, and I think they've been working it very hard, and actually some more sort of lateral thinking coming, and different ways of doing stuff. So,
Exactly.
moving on. So, one thing that John and I have been involved with, the solos unfortunately weren't able to hold their national championships at East Lothian, so we've been working with the class, and Doug there, the president, have been very innovative. And we saw 100 sailors, I think, plus, wasn't it, John, at 27 clubs racing on Sunday, which was
Yeah, I mean, for James, he must have been the PRO of the largest number of race courses ever. I mean, unfortunately, if people see the photos, the wind didn't necessarily play ball in all the sailing clubs, but that's the nature of the beast. And I think just to have a fun event, because if you look at national or even open meetings, it's often the same people in the chocolates, same people picking up the trophies, whereas this was really about participation. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. It looks like the wind was definitely better up north.
Well, that was Leon Loudson, and that's Hillhead. But what's interesting, coming the feedback was a lot of positive feedback, and the class are finding that that's Lockhinch, up near Inverness. So
That's a lot of chips and peas.
Yeah, so we went from Inverness right down to Digisham and Salcombe in the southwest, so covering really all corners. But the feedback to the class has been great. They're finding a whole load of new faces popped up in this, who perhaps in the past have been slightly daunted by going to a nationals or an open meeting. They could be part of a bigger picture and be part of something different in their own club. And that's been some of the positive feedback, that they felt that they've joined in and been part of something which perhaps in the past they wouldn't. So great to see some names coming forward.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Olympic sailing and full-time sailing, actually it sometimes does the sailors a lot of good to have a little bit of a break. And actually, I think for grassroots sailing, it's probably been good to have a little bit of a break from all the opens and the nationals and so on, and get people back in their home club. And in terms of the 2-man fleet, maybe encouraging people to sail with members of their family. I really think everyone has every cloud has a silver lining, and people can take advantage of this. Certainly the club will be bringing out people who perhaps have neglected their boats in the past, because it's a really good activity to do in a social distancing way.
So and it was interesting. We had Simon at Littleton, who was actually involved in organising it. But talking to him, he'd only just come back to sailing after so many years' absence due to COVID, and thinking really want a break. He joined Littleton and borrowed their club boat. Loved it so much, went out and bought his own solo, and then suddenly he's competing. So what we're seeing is, I think, people coming back to sailing who perhaps are giving it a miss and realising perhaps what they're missing.
Especially single-handed sailing.
Yeah. So some good things happening, and I think some good innovation happening. Right. So moving on. So we've had we've had racing without a race officer now, and that was our latest thing with the solos. So now training without a coach, John.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was trying to do time lapse, it was one of the most difficult parts, was starting and stopping my stopwatch accurately. I think you need a third hand, but
well, you need a tracker, John.
And there we go.
Right. Okay.
So the first thing I was going to say, I know not everybody, but a lot of people were super keen to get back to racing. But actually, when you're training, it doesn't have to be race focused. You can really go out and work on your boat handling or your boat speed without going around a course. And I think that's a key thing. It's something we do a lot, is just to break sailing down into the various elements and focus on one particular element, whether it's, wire to wire tackings, or a last minute drop at the leeward mark, or whatever it is, just to go and practice a specific thing. And I think once you're out in the water, things are really good now. It's more the launch and recovery, which is the problem. With a single hander, just make sure that you can get your trolley. It's one thing I've discovered. Yeah. So I think we've had a bit of mixed messaging about the group sizes and things like that. So it's probably worth refreshing that the gathering limit doesn't apply when you're on the water. It's gathering onshore. So if we didn't make that clear in the last webinar, I'm really sorry about that. I'm just trying to keep the message really simple.
On the water, it's sort of really unlimited, I guess, isn't it now? It's just the shore side that causes the problem.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make that really clear. So it's just launching in a sensible way, coming in a sensible way. Just be a bit more conservative with the conditions. In other words, not too light or too windy, so you're very capable. And we do have coach training going on now, and I think personally it's affected the way that I've done it, that actually you don't need to gather on shore. You can do it, that stuff you can do it by Zoom or whatever, the briefings, debriefs, share video on WhatsApp. You don't need to do that. Everybody's stuck together in a classroom.
Well, I think that's what this sort of situation has really encouraged, isn't it? The use of this sort of technology, and we don't need to have committee meetings. We can now join in on Zoom, and I think people are finding that more accessible, aren't they? And it's more for a lot of people. Going to a meeting in a club is quite daunting, or even a briefing, or even the prize giving. I think, as we were saying earlier, but actually, as we saw with the sailors, to be part of it on Zoom is more of a leveler.
Yeah, and people were very willing to chat that way. I mean, talking about the travel, I could be wrong and I'd have to check my accounts, but I don't think I've actually put any diesel in my van this year.
This year. Yeah, I think we're all hopefully saving money, which we can spend on our sailing.
But the point in that initial bullet was actually, it makes a lot of sense for the coach to travel to the clubs. So if you want to bring in some expertise, whereas traditionally you may have sailors going to the coach or the venue. So specifically sailors will go to a certain venue, or they will travel to a certain coach, whereas it makes a lot of sense to have one person travelling and everybody staying local. And the British sailing team, they're doing a really good job. I know it's psychologically it must be incredibly hard preparing for something that's due to start in a few days, and then you suddenly find it's a year and a few days.
Yeah, well, today was Olympic day one, was it, or the opening ceremony? What was it?
Yeah, the opening ceremony is on a Friday evening. I actually think the time zone for Japan and UK actually work quite well. That we'll be able to follow things if they do happen. But it is worth, if you look at not only the UK, but worldwide, the elite athletes do tend to have a very slightly relaxed criteria to what they can and can't do, but they're also being incredibly vigorous. So in terms of the gym, everything disinfected. They had to book in advance, limited number of people there. So, it may seem like everything's going on as normal, but I've been really impressed with the amount of work they've done there, and also the attitude of the athletes. I think it must be very hard. I do think for some of the young athletes, having an extra year to prepare is probably a good thing, but change is difficult for all of us.
Yeah, but fingers crossed. There's been some talk about this week about uncertainty still in the Olympics, I think, hasn't there?
Absolutely, it's well above my pay grade if it goes on. I think if it does, it will be safe and simple. I think that would be the catchphrase.
Yeah. But interestingly, there was an article in the BBC about the logistics, and even things like the ambulances for the horses. They've had to effectively mothball all that kit that they have to bring in for another year. So
it's a unique situation. But I've been really pleased with the British sailing team and whatever. As a sport, we've done really well carrying on with the training. I see lots of lovely pictures of Matilda Nichols and whatever on the the 2024 program, as it were, are still cracking on. But this idea for the majority of us just to stay local, I think, with your coach training is very important. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
struggling to remember what my third point was until you put it up, Simon.
Okay. Right. The governing body.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, because I think ultimately we're more likely to get like the RYA given freedom to put out the stipulation rather than waiting for the government to actually address each and every sport. I guess it's just a
I hope
huge
so
backlog.
because yes, Boris can't know everything, and
Well, I think he doesn't.
knowing the difference between an optimist and a laser probably is way beyond his uh,
Yeah,
brain scale.
well, I've seen on the I don't know what the politically correct term is, but the various mimes going on. Some people are unsure the difference between a virus and a bacteria. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
I can understand that. But I just think that the RWA have literally done what they needed to do, and it's just a waiting phase. So between now and then, we just need to be sensible, and we have restarted racing, which I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that was the aim when we started this.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, and as you
weeks
say,
ago.
it's now getting the detail right, and hopefully the RWA and the other sporting governing bodies will be devolve that power, and then they understand how their sports work, they understand what the government's trying to achieve, and they can come up with the correct answers.
I'm just, oh no, I'm constantly checking the coach yourself to win page,
All right.
just in case there's any questions. But I have some, I have some questions that are not relative to restart sailing, but do ask because we're only doing the show every couple of weeks, and we want to try and make it just as up to date and current as it possibly can be. So yeah, the restart racing, it's just a common sense approach. And I think actually, from what I've seen, people have been pretty good. You need to launch separated. You need to keep your distance, and the summer's the best time. I'm probably more worried about November, December when we have the flu season.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's going to be interesting.
Sorry, did you
Sorry.
did you just lose me there?
Yeah, I think we had a bit of a bandwidth thing, but we're back again.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I promise I have been paying my internet bills, so quite happy to repeat. I just think November, December is traditionally cold and flu season, and it was really good to see the government's going to be doing flu jabs. So obviously that won't help with COVID, but it will help keep a lot more people a lot better.
Well, that's
Um,
right, and away from the NHS, that allow them to focus.
Yeah, well, I personally think they should all get a bit of a pay rise, but that's going off into politics. But yeah, the idea of keeping things safe and simple, and I think that's a racing technique. You try and keep things as simple as you can, so there's less to go wrong. But that actually works for the big picture, lots of things in life. I've already mentioned the change of venue, for example, for the Masters Europeans, when one venue couldn't host it, which was Monaco. They moved down the road to a more suitable venue. And just to say again, it looks like Kiel is going ahead. So probably, might be able to even do a live from Kiel.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's and how many boats do they see there? That's into thousands, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's traditionally, however you measure it, that the
Yeah,
largest sailing event in the calendar,
yeah,
and I think they were absolutely determined to have it this year, and they started that process very early, and I think that was exactly the right thing to
yeah,
do. But there we go.
yeah. So we've done the solos.
Yeah,
So
I
we've
mean I thought that was a fantastic event.
yeah, and I think sort of approved some ideas and got everyone involved. And then looking something similar at the end of August, clubs there. So looking for clubs to sort of express an interest and same sort of concept. Really
I think,
local.
yeah, off the top of my head, that one of those days is possibly the 30th is one of the days of the radial nationals.
Well, yes,
It'd be
but
interesting to see if that
there's
can be
no reason
incorporated.
why those I think the aeros can't join in. And
Yeah,
we can take their results. They can have the app and they can be part of it. So it doesn't have to be a dedicated event. And we actually saw that with the solos. I mean, Lymington Town, they ran their event as part of the club racing. So
perfect.
And then we had Lockinch Charlie sailing on his own. You know, he was his own
in
race officer, doing his own media. So
in the best wind.
in the best
There's a
wind.
lot of
So
breeze, wasn't there?
I think where we're trying to get to is formats that are flexible and can adapt to different circumstances and not being too rigid. I think that's really what the way forward is. I think.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right. So he's done the solo. So let's skip through that one. And then finally, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the questions which came in was, "What about the 7th of August?" But I realise that's actually a private message about some coaching, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I think hopefully if we keep to the 2 weeks, because we saw it before where the government issued some guidance, and then the specific sporting guidance actually took quite a lot longer to come out. So we're sort of in the same situation as everybody else, and the RWA, you know, we're hoping that there'll be some government news, and we'll try and respond as quickly as we can. Please do like the video and share it, because that will help it get out to more people, because we are doing our very best to try and answer your questions. And more importantly, if you follow, it means when we do a live show, so if, for example, we do a pop-up show, you'll get that little notification telling you that we're just about to start. Because, you know, if there is some concrete news about double-handers or at least some more clarification, we want to get the information out there as soon as possible.
That's right. So we're on standby. But we'll see you everyone in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.